Hey.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. My dog's really going.
So thank you very much, Renee, for joining us tonight. We're here with Ray, and if I mispronounce your name, please let me know, but Renee Carlino. Is that correct?
Yep, okay. You got it right.
And she is the author of Swear on This Life, which is our book for March. We read that globally all over the world, and to a resounding success. We had lots of great feedback. Everybody loved the book. So different from anything we've read recently. So it was really, I mean, it's an intense story, but it was a real refreshing kind of light and page turner. I read it in one sitting, which I haven't done in a very long time. So I absolutely adored the book. We have lots of people with us today with lots of questions, and I've got emails of including lots of questions as well. So if anybody, just some admin to start with, if anybody wants to ask a question, then there is a functionality on Zoom where you can put your hand up, and I will unmute your volume if you want to ask in person, or you're very welcome to just type it in the chat box on your right-hand side, and then I will make sure to ask Renee when there is a dip in the conversation. And otherwise, I will go ahead and ask some of the ones that I got through email. But Renee, if you would take a moment just to introduce yourself and kind of just walk us through who you are and how you got into writing and all of that really fun stuff, that would be great.
It's a pretty short story. I've written 7 full-length novels and a novella. So Swear on This Life was my 5th that I wrote. And then I have one coming out in August that's been completed for about 2 years. And then I'm writing my 8th, I guess. I self-published a book called Lucian Divine, which was very different, and that's a whole story in itself. But basically, I started out, I always knew I would go into the arts in some form. I got a film degree, and I was working in television development for a little while. I worked with a couple of big producers to develop a TV show. I did some screenwriting and writer's room writing, and just didn't feel like that was my place necessarily. So I was also newly, I wasn't married yet. I think I was engaged, and my husband works in the film business, and we realized that we would never see each other if we both had a job in that business. So I went back to school, and we never saw each other when I did. I went back to school and I got my teaching credential, and then I became a 7th grade English teacher. And I was always writing before that. And I tell stories sometimes. I tell this story about like when people, and it's actually my website says I started writing as a teenager, but that's not really true. I always tell this story about how I was like 7 or 8, and I was with a friend, and we were saying, let's write letters to our imaginary boyfriends in the military. We had these imaginary boyfriends that were in the military. So I started writing this series of letters to him. And I mean, they were like these really gushy, and I had never even read a romance novel. They were just these really gushy novels. These really gushy letters, just like, when will you come back to me, my love, and all of these things. And anything that I heard that was remotely romantic, I would sort of put into these letters. So, and then my mom found this stack, and she just went, what is this? Like, what? I mean, you're so young. Like, where are you even coming up with these things? And so I always say, that's when the romance writer was born in me. So I was always writing, and I was always writing poems and stuff. And then I wrote screenplays, like I said, and I worked in development for a little while after I went to college. Went back to school, got my credential, became a teacher. Was reading a lot more to the kids probably than I was talking about reading, and just sharing a universal love of reading books with these kids that were, getting to the age where they were choosing their own novels. And it was kind of around the Twilight time, so that was a very big thing for that age group. And it was like you were seeing their eyes light up about books finally. Like, we push all these books on the kid, and then finally there's a point where they say, wow, I found a genre that I like, and I'm going to read this. And then when I quit to have my kids, I started writing my first novel, and I thought, I'm going to get 60 pages in like everything else I've done, and then I'm going to quit, and it's going to forever be entombed on my computer. And because there were so many things like that already. I had written so many screenplays that never went anywhere. We tried to sell a pilot to Showtime, and then it didn't get bought. And then I didn't have a whole lot of faith that anything like crazy would happen with it. But I wrote, and then I really got into it and finished it, and then I sent it to my friend who was a lit major, and she's a lawyer now, and she said, it'll be so refreshing to read something other than like a deposition. So I said, oh, don't get too excited. This is like the first like actual, like the first long prose, that I've ever even attempted. So I think she got maybe 50 pages in, and she was like, oh my God, you have to do this for your life. Like you can do it. You can actually do it. You can tell a story and you can develop characters, and it's, she said, I've read worse that are totally published, and she said, just keep going forward with it. So I think that I queried maybe 3 agents. And then I got really impatient. I went to a writer's workshop. I workshopped the heck out of the book. I hired a developmental editor that used to work for HarperCollins who helped me, elevate the writing a little bit. And then I finally kind of threw my arms up and said, I'm going to self-publish this book. And that was Sweet Thing. That was my first novel. And 2 weeks later, I hit the USA Today. And I got agents calling me, and then I got an agent. And then very shortly after that, I sold Sweet Thing and 2 more to Atria. And then I got a subsequent book after the third, which was After the Rain, to write Before We Were Strangers, Swear on This Life, and then Wish You Were Here, which comes out in August. So I'm a fast talker. I gave you basically like the whole history in less than 2 minutes, hopefully. But yeah, I love writing. And I always say, for people who ask, and I get a lot of questions like, well, how do you do it? And what's the secret to being able to sit down and write? And I always copy Nora Roberts and say, you just have to sit your ass in the chair and write. But the truth is you have to have sort of an innate ability to tell a story and something that is inside of you, that where you enjoy it, because writing 300 pages, and that's a short novel, is, if you don't love it, I couldn't write a 7-page college essay. I mean, I didn't like doing that, but I love writing fiction. So, and I fell in love with writing the novel, I think, while I was teaching, because I was exploring so many elements of fiction, like plot and scene and character and all those bits and pieces that make it so great. But yeah, that's it.
Well, it's so interesting because you come from like such an interesting background, seeing as, I mean, we get pitched probably daily a novel that is self-published. So right. You going ahead and I mean, lots of people don't have the story that you have because unfortunately they self-publish and maybe it doesn't go anywhere. But, and with the way the world is, I feel like there's a lot more people writing nowadays because they can self-publish. So they feel that they can get it out there even if they're not picked up by a publisher. So you definitely have a success story there. Are all your novels the same genre, or is there, do you go across a multitude of genres?
I think that, well, Lucian Divine is the only book that is different in that it has like a paranormal element, which was the last book, and I self-published that book. And actually what happened was that when we were, well, I always wanted to write the book about this alcoholic angel who falls in love with his soul to watch over, and he kind of goes off the ropes because she's starting to date and he's in love with her, and he can't stand to sit by and watch her date all these, one loser after another. So it's sort of a silly satire. But the first 3 were very much considered new adult contemporary romance, and then we started attempting to slowly reposition me towards women's fiction more. So there are more elements in Swear on This Life, Wish You Were Here, and Before We Were Strangers that would be considered more like women's fiction, but I still think that they fall under the large umbrella of contemporary romance because of that ending and the emotionally satisfying ending that you're sort of promising your readers with that type of book. So.
Sorry, I have to keep switching back and forth between the videos. Okay, I do have a very good question now, kind of diving right into the book that we read specifically. It's from Laura, and I'm just going to read it verbatim, but she's written here, being born and raised in a small town in Ohio, then moving to Columbus after college for big city life, this book really stood out to me. Every detail in your book that took place in Ohio seems so accurate, from the factory closing, road markers, small town life, and the drug/farm aspects of the book. My question is, how was Ohio chosen to be the state where Jason and Emmeline grew up, and is there a personal connection to that state?
There is not a strong personal connection, though. I have been to Ohio several times. I've been to Cleveland and Cincinnati, and I went to a little town called Wauseon, which I'm sure she'll know, maybe just outside of Dayton. So I was familiar with the geography of Ohio, which allowed me to paint a scene. But the fictional town of Nebel, which is where these 2 kids grow up, is actually based on the town that I grew up in, which is a town called Lakeside, which is a very rural part of San Diego County. You wouldn't believe it if you're not from the West Coast and you've never been to San Diego, but San Diego stretches so far east that, you know, you're 45 minutes from water, and it's very rural. That's horse country. We had a lot of property, and there was actually a road called El Monte Road that had mile markers like that. And at the 5.5 mile marker, there was not a long dirt road with mailboxes and two houses. There was just a small canyon that had rocks that had a little stream. And as teenagers, we used to go there and kind of party there. That was like a thing. Like, people would go to 5.5, and it was the 5.5 mile mark. So all of that was vivid in my mind. There was also an egg ranch that was on another long sort of county road in Lakeside. There was don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that Lakeside is like the meth capital of all of Southern California. So there was a very big drug influence there, and a lot of that was going on. So so it was easy to take, and the only reason why I didn't just place it there was because sometimes things are just too close to home, and I wanted it to be more the Midwest, and I wanted it to be about that factory closing and that. And we didn't have that here necessarily, a very deep, dark recession because of one company like GMC closing and basically a whole town shutting in on itself. But so I based it on sort of the Flint, Michigan, you know, effect, the GMC factory closing in Flint, Michigan, and then took that and made up a town in Nebo. And yeah, since I had been to Ohio and remembered just the flatness and just towns that you could be in a bigger how do you say, sort of more of a metropolitan area, and then suddenly you were out in the middle of nowhere, just in the middle of farmland. So yeah, so yes and no. So yeah.
Fair enough. We have another question about the characters, and this question always gets asked, but if they're based on somebody you know, or how do you develop characters when you're writing, in your writing?
Let me think. Well, there is one character that's completely real. I got made fun of so horribly. I had this horrible perm. Like, it was my mom did hair, but she did hair like I feel like she was when would my mom have been a hairdresser? Like in the late 50s, 60s. So she was doing like, you know, wigs and pomping and all these things. And then she stopped when she had kids, and then decided that when we were little girls, she was going to start doing our hair again. So she gave me this terrible perm. It was this really tight, like coil perm. And I went to school, and there was this kid, and he made so much fun of me. Oh my God. He called me Poodlehead and Medusa and all this stuff, and he followed me around. So yes, I based that character exactly on him, and I'm like, I hope he reads this. As far as everyone else, let me think. Jace as a character embodies more than one person in my life. They're always a little bit about my husband's book. I dedicated to my husband because I always write them for him. He's like the person who I care about his opinion. You know, I care what he thinks most and first, and he gets to read the really raw first draft version. And this was the book that he said, like, this is your best book so far. And I don't think everyone would agree with that. I don't even know if I agree with that myself, but to him, it was his favorite. So I dedicated it to him. Jace is a lot like Anthony, my husband, in the sense that he can be very playful but also stoic at the same time, and driven to follow through with things. So and patient. And ultimately, I felt like Jace had like the patience of a saint, just for being able to wait for her to figure it out. And really, the whole time I was going, why doesn't she finish the book? Why doesn't she finish the book? But and like everyone must wonder, why doesn't she finish the book? I mean, my God, the book's about her. She knows it's about her. And I always tell people, you know, if she finishes the book, then I have to finish the book. And so it would have been a very short book. And so as painful as it was, I had to stretch it out, and I had to sort of justify it by her own fear of facing what she knew she would have to go through, which was this great epiphany and existential sort of change within herself. If that makes sense.
No, absolutely. It's funny that you say that about finishing the book, because I sent a message to one of our members who was was talking about coming, and I'm like, well, definitely come. And even if you don't finish the book, make sure you come. And she goes, are you kidding me? I'm not going to be that girl. I finished the book. She goes,
Oh, yeah.
it was
Yeah.
mentioned way too many times in the book that
Right.
that she hadn't finished the book. But that came up in New York. I went to the New York Girly Book Club on Monday, and it came up, the fact that it took her so long, and how could she possibly take that long to finish it? But
Right.
I completely understand as an author why that had to be.
Yeah, it was a tough decision, and actually the structure of the book, the book was edited so many times. I'm not even sure exactly how it started. I want to say, well, I know for sure the book before, which was also went back and forth between past and present, that I had written the entire, I had written it in chronological order. So I wrote the whole childhood first and then wrote their adulthood. And so then we had to go back in and figure out when they meet and when he's revealed as an adult to her. And then also, why did he write the book, you know? And I mean, well, I'm sure we'll get to that in another question, but why he wrote it, really why he wrote it, and why it took her so long to read it, and what was happening while she was reading it. So, yeah.
Another question we have here is from Baltimore. The Baltimore Girly Book Club sent me in a couple questions that they had from last night's meeting. One was, why did both of the addict parents get redeemed in some way?
I don't feel like the mother was redeemed necessarily. I felt like the mother's character and the relationship with her daughter was resolved, but not necessarily redeemed. So where I felt like it would have been very trite and cliche for her to go to her mother and her mother say, I'm so sorry for everything that happened. I really wanted her mother to be a real person and a selfish person. And because there are people who are real and selfish and who can't handle motherhood and can't handle certain things, and they're it doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad people. So as far as the father being redeemed, I wanted Jace to write this book. I mean, I wanted Emmeline to explore Jace's point of view on her life, so that she could then go to her father and either say, yes, you were a very horrible man, you did these horrible things to me, or say, I was a child and this is how I perceived it, and now I'm an adult and now I can see my parents differently. And I went through, you know, and I feel like everyone goes through at some point in their life, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, I don't know, whenever, but at some point where, and if their parents are alive and they're involved in their life still, and they're struggling to, because no one has a perfect relationship, they say, why are my parents like this? And then at some point a switch gets flipped and they say, wow, my parents are human.
Definitely.
And I'm human. And one day my kids will look at me and go, you're not perfect. You're a mother. You're supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to not make mistakes in life, because how will I know how to be a good person if you're making mistakes in life? But it's just the opposite. So as where I felt like her father's character was redeemed, and he was the one that stuck around, that her mother's character was just her relationship with her was just resolved, but she wasn't necessarily, there was no redemption there. I don't think for Emmeline or for the mother. I think that it was just I think that Emmeline just accepted that her mother was not a good mother, period.
Okay. The other question from Baltimore is, if you had a choice of further developing any of the characters other than Emmeline and Jace, who would you write about? A lot of the women from the Baltimore Book Club really liked the roommate character.
Yeah, I did. I did not spend a lot of time on the roommate character in this book. I think I don't remember why, but I think because I spent so much time developing their childhood years that I didn't have time to, because most of the time when I'm writing a book, like the book that I wrote that's coming out in August, Wish You Were Here, and actually the book that I'm writing now. Anyway, Wish You Were Here, there's so much more, so much more between the friend character and the protagonist. And that's developed more, and they have this sort of codependent relationship. So yes, I would have liked to have, I don't even remember what her name was. Kara. Oh my gosh, I can't remember what her name is. I want to look and see, but, also Tyler, or was it Taylor? Oh, geez, that's really sad that I don't know. This is 3 books ago, so I have to go back and look. Her boyfriend at the time, I wish that I would have developed, I felt he was slightly underdeveloped at the end as well, but we cut so much. And we didn't add in there. Those weren't the places that my editor wanted us to add. And she is great. She has a lot of voice, and she's very good at knowing what needs to be there and what doesn't need to be there. So there might've been some scenes with the roommate that were cut. I felt like I did rush her ending a little bit, but yeah. Probably the roommate and the boyfriend would be the two.
Yeah, the boyfriend, he was annoying.
Yeah.
So that was a personal observation.
No, he was annoying. And I love it that I wrote the kayaking scene actually happened to me. So that was that's a funny true story. So then, and I intentionally put it in there just to make my husband mad, but we decided we live in San Diego. So we live in North County. So La Jolla is close to where we live. So one day in November, cold here for us, which isn't really cold everywhere else, but it's cold for us, and cold water. And it's not, you don't go swimming in November in the beach really. One day he woke up on a Saturday morning and he said, let's take the boys kayaking. And they were really young. They were really, really young, but they were like 6 and 7 or 5 and 6. He said, let's take the boys kayaking. And what we should, and ocean kayaking, he met at La Jolla Shores. And what you have to do is you have to kayak past the break, the surf break. And he's a surfer, and he's like, this is no big deal. You got this, Renee. You can do this. I've been swimming in the ocean a million times. I'm like, yeah, I can do this. And I was kind of intimidated. There were like classes going on. I didn't see any little children, 6 or 7, on any of these boats, on any of these kayaks. So I'm like, oh, this might not be as easy as it looks. So the first kayak that comes back to the rental place, the guy says, you go, and I had my younger one who was 6, probably 6 at the time, and have him sit in front, and he's got a paddle. He's only 6 years old, and he's got this huge paddle. And you got to paddle past that break. You got to get past that. Don't let the boat go sideways, because once you let the boat go sideways, it's going to flip over on top of itself. And so my husband said, I'm going to push you past the break. Like I'll run out there, and then I'll come back. I'll get another kayak, and I'll put our other son on that one, and then I'll meet you out there. Once you get past the break, it's very calm, and you just kayak along. Well, I mean, what we didn't realize, and this is so stupid, but our kids could not paddle. They were 6 and 7, so all they were hitting, like he was just hitting me with the kayak, and I was like, with the oar, and I'm like, put the oar down, my God. And my husband's pushing the boat, and he's going, you got it, paddle harder. And so I'm going, and yes, we get past the break. And so I get past the break, and I say to my little son, I say, give me that oar. You can't have that oar anymore, because he's been hitting me in the face with it, and he's just playing with it. So I set the oar down. So it's just me on this big, long ocean kayak. I'm out past the break, and I'm waiting for my husband to come back, and I'm rowing backwards to not get into the break. And then here comes a big set of waves, and I'm going, oh no, we're going in. A big wave comes, takes us in, and he's nowhere to be found. So I turn the boat around, and I turn the kayak around, and I say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it myself. And I'm paddling. Get right here comes a wave, and then whoosh, all the way over. And then what was so scary was that I was maybe like waist high in water, or it was probably higher. It's probably mid chest, but my son was underneath the kayak, underneath the water, and he had a life jacket on, but I couldn't because of the suction, like the boat suctioned, you know. I couldn't get the kayak up, and I was going, oh my God, I was screaming. It was horrible. And I finally got it over, and then I just grabbed my son. I left the kayak, and I swam into the shore. And then my husband comes running out. He was still waiting for another kayak to come in. He comes running out, and he goes, "What happened?" And I said, "The boat flipped over on us. We're never doing this again. I almost killed our son." You know, and so I had to some way put that into the story. And when he read it, he just started cracking up. He's like, "You so overreacted about that." And I'm like, no, not when you're a mom, not when your baby is underneath, you know. And as soon as I got him out, he said, "Why'd you do that to me, Mom? Why'd you leave me under that boat?" And I said, "I didn't mean to." And, you know, it was horrible. It was traumatic. And so that was true. But anyway, sorry, that was a long tangent.
Well, now it's forever listed, forever noted.
Yeah. It's in the book forever. Yeah.
There you go. Your kids will know about it.
For sure. They remember.
The next question is, what was your motivation in killing off Jace's brother? What were we supposed to infer caused his death?
Oh, what was the motivation for that? He drowned. His character was totally based on Jeff Buckley. I've based a character on Jeff Buckley in every single one of my books. It's really embarrassing, but it's sort of like my Alfred Hitchcock thing. You can find Jeff Buckley was a musician who had died in 1997. He drowned in the Mississippi. He was completely sober. He decided to go into right down on Beale Street in Memphis. He was recording his second album. He had he had made this beautiful first album called Grace. Actually, there's a lot of references to that in all my other books too. So it was sort of an homage to that, but also I wanted Jace to be left completely and utterly alone after Emmeline leaves, because I wanted his strength and his fortitude to be an inspiration to her as an adult, which I think it was, because what happened was that he was left on the dirt road with the mom while she kind of went to live with her aunts that were, successful and could give her a proper education and home and stuff. And he went and did it on his own. So it was just sort of like juxtaposing those two things, and for her to be, I don't want to say whiny about her life, but for her to look at him and say, well, he did it and he went on and he went to college and then he wrote this book and he was successful and he didn't have all this extra help. He lost his brother and then he had this mom that was relying on him to sort of take care of her. And it was a moment in the book that needed conflict, I think, probably. And she had this crush on the older brother. So I think that once that was realized that it was just a puppy love crush, then I was able to explore the real relationship and the profound deep friendship that she had with Jace then at that point.
Okay, that makes complete sense. And let's really explore the reason he wrote the book. Like we talked about it just briefly before, but why? I mean, in the world of social media and Facebook, everybody's just like, didn't you know how to use Facebook? Why such like grandiose gestures? And then even after she gets the book, like he's kind of an ass about it all. So if you can talk us through that would be great.
I think that he, I wanted him to exude confidence, but okay, let me start with, so that was a long question, so let me try to answer it piece by piece. With social media and everything, why didn't this happen? Well, she did look for him. She looked for him for a long time. And it was sort of, you have to think that it was sort of very accessible social media that she started looking for him. So if they were in their late 20s, we're talking 10 years ago, whatever. There was social media and Facebook was around 10 years ago easily, but it wasn't not everyone was on it. You didn't expect every single person to have access to social media in that way. Why such a grandiose gesture? Because he said that he would, and because he was true to his word, and because he wanted her to explore. I feel like he had a sense that she had moved on in her life in a way that, and maybe he didn't know this, but what she did was that she sort of pushed all of those feelings aside, and she went to therapy and she did all the steps, and she never really acknowledged the fact that, yes, I had this life that wasn't ideal, but it also wasn't horrible. That's the scene where when she's with her dad and he says, and do you remember when I used to take you swimming in the creek and you used to hold on to my shoulders and he used to dive under and then she would tap his head when she wanted to come up for air, whatever it was, and that's how she learned how to swim. I wanted that to come back, because sometimes, we get so swept up in like all the anger and all the hate and all these things, and we stop talking to people that we were close to in our life, and we don't talk to them over one little petty thing. And then later on you think about things, or things are brought up. I'm sorry, I'm going off on the wrong. To answer your question, why did he do it? He did it so that she would go through everything all over again, and that so she would live it through his eyes. And why did he decide to turn them in? Well, he did it for her own good. He did it because he knew that they wouldn't survive, and that they couldn't have their best life doing what they were doing. Where were they going to go? They were going to run away. She was going to go back to foster care. He was going to go back to live with his mom. She would get in trouble. They could never be together. He wanted her to go. He knew she was going to go live with her aunt, and he wanted to do it without having to say goodbye. And I think it's okay. That might have been the more mature way to do it, but he didn't do it that way. He went on and lived his separate life. I always think there's these amazing relationships where people are like, I met my husband at 14 and we are perfect now 30 years later. and then there's also the relationship that you look back and you go, I wish that I would have met him when I was 25 instead of 15, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that, or 30 or 35 or whatever it is, or
Yeah.
55. But so that's sort of a theme in this book. I remember my sister had this great boyfriend, and she broke up with him too. And then she always had the like, what if feeling after that. I don't think she does now, obviously, but this was when we were much younger. But she had that what if feeling for a while. And so it was everyone in our family kind of said, well, it's too bad that she didn't meet him 10 years later, because he would have been perfect, you know? So this was that Jace and Emmeline had formed this beautiful bond as children. And then they had to be individuals for a really long time in order for them to have a really powerful relationship as adults. So
That's a very good answer, actually. And why did he write the ending that way in his book?
because that was the alternative. It was either you know, you come to me, or it was just an alternative. Like he said, it's fiction, you know, and this is what could happen. And why are you not addressing your issues? Why are you not allowing yourself to forgive? Even though we talked about the mother and then not really being redemption for the mother, why won't you allow yourself, Emmeline, to forgive so that you can move on and be stronger? Because she was struggling when we first meet her, even though things were fine and she lived in this cute apartment and she had this friend and she was an adjunct professor and all these things. Even though you might add those up to all be positives, there was still something that was just nagging at her. And it was because she hadn't addressed, and her aunts were very supportive of it, but they were also very much like, we don't push her. We're not going to push her. We're going to let her, you know, we're going to let her do this in her own way. But I think that he really pushed her in a tough love kind of way to say, hey, look at this, look at our life, look at this bond that we had, look at our childhood, look at all these great things. Look, do you remember when we used to read these books, and you know, I used to stand on this rock and our first kiss and all of this stuff that we went through, and you can't just erase it and become a different person. It's all part of you, good, bad, all of that, you know? So, I think that he was fully prepared to accept. I'm talking about him like he's someone else right now. It's so weird because I just made it up. But I think that if I were thinking about him and how his reactions were, he was like fully prepared to say, okay, it's fine if you decide that you want to be with this guy and that that's your life. But also I want you to know that I wrote this book about our childhood, and this is how it affected me, and this is how it changed me. And I want you to read it and see how I saw you go through your childhood, and hopefully you can address those things too.
You're allowed to take on your characters. They are your characters.
I know. I was weird when I'm talking about them like that, and then I'm like, oh wait, yeah, they're not real.
Another question from Baltimore was, would you ever consider writing a sequel to this book and talking about what happens to the two characters?
I just don't. I just always have. So many people. So I'm reading The Bronze Horseman again. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that book or has read it.
Yeah, I've read it.
I've read it so many times. I read all 3 books. And if I were writing this really epic, rich, historical, or even very epic, long life story that has so much conflict in it, yes, I would write a sequel. But I think that I resolved the conflict in this book, and there was that, you know, that she had to face her own inner demons about her childhood, and that he wrote this book to help her do that, and that it allowed her to do that, and that was resolved. And once it was resolved, there's really nowhere to go. It would just be sort of a frilly little. I mean, I could go on. So the book that I'm writing now is more of an epic, long-term friendship that is sort of like 2 people who are never available at the right time at the same time, and it's different in my mind than this is. This had a very solid resolution at the end, which was that she woke up and said, what am I doing? Like, I get it, and it's all good. I patched things up with my ex, and we're friends now, and he's moved on, and we weren't right for each other, and I got to see my dad, and that, because those are the things that always linger with people forever. And I got to see my mom, and now I know all those things that I guessed about my mom are true. So it was just for her to feel complete and that big giant void to be filled. And then once it was filled, it's you.
Okay, I can understand that for sure. So this is a quote from the book. It's impossible to really hate someone if you don't love them at least a little. Do you believe this to be true?
Yeah, I really, really do. I really do. I think that I think that hate is sort of like love. It's like this very abstract thing and hard to explain. And I've had this argument with a million people, like, do you believe in soulmates? And I'm always like, well, no, I think you can have a bunch of soulmates. I think that you can have, because soulmates, it's like, I don't know, it's like saying peanut butter and jelly. I don't have like it doesn't mean anything. Soulmate should mean there is one person in this world for you, but how can that be true? How can it be true when we can get along with so many people? And how, like, as a woman, I can feel so close to other women or other men, but not in the way that I'm close to my husband. And so I guess I can call my husband my soulmate, but then I think about people who have lost their husbands, or they've lost their wives, and then they go on, they remarry, and is that person not their soulmate? I mean, I don't know. So as far as the hating thing, and I am bringing this back full circle, is that hating someone is, to really, really, truly feel hate for somebody, you have to have been hurt by them. And we usually don't let people hurt us unless we let people in, right? A little bit. So maybe it's not love, but at least some form of caring. So so if you just didn't care and you had absolutely no respect for somebody, you would just be aloof. You'd go, oh, I don't like them. Oh. But you wouldn't go, I hate them, with like this tortured passion. It would just be like, oh, that person's not for me, And then you can hate, and I think that you can hate a type of person. Like you could hate a person who hates, or who you feel is evil or is abusive or is this or that or whatever. You can hate. You can make a generalization about people who abuse animals or children or something like that and say I hate them. But to hate somebody in your own life, I really feel like you have to care about them a little bit.
Yeah, perhaps it's dislike. You can dislike all sorts of people, but actually, I would agree with what you say.
There was a sentence in there, I think.
Yeah, but on that point, I mean, there's a lot of sentences in there that are very kind of poignant. Here's another one. This could be the best thing for us after it stops being the worst. Did you write these all, like when you sat down and did your first draft? There's so many of them. This is just 2 of them, but like just really kind of poetic lines. Did you write them all in your first draft, or did you go back and add them in, or how did you come about these really insightful and deep comments?
Thanks. Thank you. I appreciate that. I always wonder sometimes when I'm writing stuff like that, if it's cheesy or if it's coming across the right way. I wrote, that was written in the first draft because that was always a theme in my mind, because I knew that he was going to be the one to say, we can't do this. Like, this isn't going to work. And so, so that's in the book. That's in the book within the book, right? That she says that it will be once it becomes, yes, but basically it was what he had said to her, even though it's what she says to him in the book. I know it's so confusing. There's like a book within a book within a book.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was always a theme that you'll see this is the right thing for us. And how could a person, and even though Jace was cocky, I always felt like I painted him as being wise beyond his years, or just, intensely perceptive. And that's sort of the joke when she says, oh yeah, she I don't know if it's the agent says like, or one of the women says, he's so perceptive. He knows how women feel and talk. And well, that's a product of him literally being isolated down on a dirt road with 2 women, with his mom and this girl, and it was him learning to see how they operate. And so when he says that, it's because he has watched a lot of cable television and he knows some things. and he's read a lot of books, and he's very smart, and he knows that once they can get through the hard part, that it will be the best thing for him. And I don't know if anybody caught on, but he did see a lecture that was her aunt, so he knew she was going to live with these people that he felt would be healthy for her, as a person,
I didn't catch that actually. But what you said about him, and I think that it came up in New York, and I think everybody was very protective of his character because they wanted to like him so much that when he did anything that was even like remotely kind of pompous, they kind of were like, no, like, why is he doing that?
I know. There's a fine line between having like a confidence that's attractive and then being just like an arrogant,
Yeah, for sure.
So.
And now knowing your background in television, is this like, would you like to see this on the silver screen?
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, it's so visual in my mind, and I always say that I would be happy, thrilled if any of the books were optioned. And I'm not particularly attached to doing it myself. Like I said, my husband works in the film business, and we've always talked about it. But I really love. I would write for TV, but I don't know that I could write my own novels. Actually, After the Rain was a screenplay before it was a book, and it sort of felt like my biggest failure. And so now I'm like a little gun shy about that. But I do plan on writing a script for Before We Were Strangers. I think that that's the most visual in my mind because of the New York subway and the trains. And I know that you guys haven't read that, but there's this big theme of transportation in that book and sort of the movement. And I just feel like it was a very visual book, and it would make a great film or TV show. Swear on This Life too, with the long dirt road and that. But yeah, I would love to see them all. I think every author would, but so few books get made into movies, and it's really hard to get a movie or TV show off the ground. So I don't have any, it's not like I'm sitting around thinking, like I'm a failure if it doesn't happen. I just think it would be icing on the cake.
Well, yeah, a lot of times they get sold and then they don't even get made.
Yeah, for sure. That happens a lot. And it's happened to a lot of my friends where they've sold them for years. They've optioned the rights for years, like 5-10 years. And then they can't do anything about it, and it doesn't get made. And then they get it back after 10 years. And it's like, at that point, no one cares. So.
And you've written 7 books. Do you have a favorite out of any of them? I know that you said your husband thought that Swear on This Life was your biggest success, but how do you feel about that?
I am not. Swear on This Life is not my favorite book. That's oddly enough. I liked writing about the road, and I liked writing about the kids. And then when I came back to the present characters, it was hard. It was a little bit hard for me to write. I had the easiest time writing my first book, Sweet Thing, and then after that would have been Before We Were Strangers. Would have been easy. Was easy for me because I was a photography minor in college, and I majored in film and cinematography, and so there's that element in there. And then there was a big, very large music element in that, and in Sweet Thing. And then the book I'm writing now is very close to home because it has characters that are my age in it, and So Swear on This Life, like I said, I enjoyed reading the kids. I enjoyed going back to my little hometown and the bus that sort of went through all the rural areas and took forever to get to the school and that type of thing. But I wouldn't, it's hard. It's like Sophie's Choice. I can't really pick a favorite. They're all different to me. I really loved Lucian Divine, which didn't fare very well, but I loved writing it because it was just a silly little trek into paranormal romance and just having fun with those characters and writing some satire. So
that's the one that you've just released, your most recent?
Yeah, that came out January 7th. It's like a fairly short novel. I think it's 280 pages. And I honestly sat around one night with my sister, and we were we were laughing and I don't even remember what we were laughing about. We were laughing. We were kind of like in that hysterical moment. And then she's like, what's the next book that you're going to write? And I said, I'm going to write a book about an alcoholic angel that falls in love with this girl. And then she's like, tell me one scene. And I told her a scene about how he's so mad because he's actually the one who turned water into wine, and he feels like Jesus sort of ripped him off. So when I told my sister, and by the way, we're Catholic, so when I told my sister, she was dying laughing, but she's like, Mom's gonna have a heart attack. That is so sacrilegious. You can't write a book like that. So I said, but mom and dad have such a great sense of humor. They'll laugh, you know? And so I dedicated it to my mom and dad, and I wrote in the dedication, like, to my mom and dad, whose faith is as strong as their sense of humor. And I said it's sort of, it's a cross between like City of Angels and Dogma. It is a little bit of a satire, but it's also a story about a fallen angel. And so I had a lot of fun writing that book, and it was a quick write, you know, and it was different, but it was fun. Cause you know, when you can world build that way and make up anything you want, and people say, well, how could that be? Like, how do his wings actually fly? I go, well, I made it up. So, you know, I get to make those things up. So that's different than in real novel writing, where people question a lot, like, how is that even possible? And why the hell did it take Emmeline so long to read the book? And then that question haunts me, because I really do say, yeah, I don't know, I could have never done it, but I kept trying to end it, and then I thought, oh, I'm going to end this book. If I end that aspect of it, then the book is over. And in my first book, a lot of people asked, what took them so long to get together? And I said, well, if they got together on the 40th page, then the book would have been over, and it would have been 40 pages long. So
I think it's a very true answer, a very honest answer.
Yeah.
I think, instead of coming up with something completely rubbish.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. It was absolutely brilliant. Everybody loved your book. I mean, we had such great reviews on it. So I hope that we read whatever else is on the horizon for you, and I wish you the best of luck.
Oh, thank you so much. This was absolutely wonderful. So much fun for a Tuesday night.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye, y'all.